The king sat majestically on his throne, slowly speaking, saying that he was giving her the right to choose a husband as a reward for victory in difficult battles. His words sounded like a slap in the face to her. Asha expected everything but this. The king continued. He said that by his order, any man she chose was obliged to immediately become her husband. The crowd behind them began to whisper like a tangle of snakes. This was outrageous to them. The noble ladies whispered that Asha was a barbarian and not worthy of the honor shown to her. Asha was silent, not knowing how to react to what was happening. One of the ladies asked in fear whether this terrible fate would affect her beautiful son. The king looked arrogant, enjoying the crowd's reaction and Asha's confusion. Those around her looked at her with envy and ill intent. Asha felt genuine horror and incomprehension, because the price for a lifelong bloody battle was the unnecessary right to choose a spouse. Before all these events, when she had just arrived in the capital with her comrades, Asha remembered that her father, Amir Pervaz, saved the crown prince at a critical moment 30 years ago. The crown prince, burning with shame and envy, ordered Amir to be sent north to destroy the Lur tribe. Amir obediently knelt down and was about to carry out the crown prince's order. He had no idea what mortal danger awaited him there, because many had already been sent there, and no one had returned from Pervaz alive. But, like a true warrior, he did not retreat and decided to fight for Pervaz. Even without support, he continued to fight fiercely and without fear, and died in the war. When Amir died, his son entered the battle to continue his father's work. The first son also died, and then the second one joined the battle. When they all fell defending Pervaz's freedom, Asha entered the battle. Asha fought for the same ideals as her family. She did not spare her strength and did not give in to the enemy. And so, after numerous battles and sleepless nights, the head of the last enemy flew off his shoulders. This exhausted Asha. Although it was hard to believe, the bright day had finally arrived. The war is over. Asha was on the battlefield and couldn't believe she was alive. Suddenly her comrade called her name. All the warriors gathered around Asha and rejoiced that they had won. And although Asha rejoiced with them, she understood that they should not rejoice for too long, because they could die of hunger. After the battle, having celebrated, they gathered in a quiet place and remembered the reward from the emperor. The survivors asked Asha if they would really receive this reward. One of the warriors noted that the emperor did not care about their castle, and most likely, they could not even dream of a reward. Asha studied the travel order and found a line there that the emperor promised to reward the warriors if they drove the Lur tribe out of Pervaz, which meant that he was obliged to give them a reward. Her comrade again expressed doubt as to whether the emperor would really keep his word. After all, he was the emperor and was free to do as he pleased. But Asha was determined to try her luck to save the people from starvation, so she and some of her people set off for the capital. Asha was prepared for the fact that it would not be easy to receive a reward from the ruler who pushed her father to his death. Emperor Evaristo, Kendrick, expressed his regrets about Amir's death to her, but his voice was false. In fact, he was not sorry at all. The emperor said that since all of Asha's brothers were dead, she inherited the title of Margrave of Pervaz as a woman. Asha confirmed that this was indeed the case. The emperor joked that, not knowing this, he had decided that it was a princess from a barbarian tribe who had come to the reception, and not a Margrave. Asha was not pleased to hear this, but she remained silent. She thought that she was ready to endure a lot, if only the inhabitants would receive money and not die of hunger. If she had to endure neglect and mockery from the emperor, then there was nothing in this that she could not endure. When the emperor suddenly asked her her age, she replied that she was 22 years old. The emperor's questions about matchmaking seemed very strange, but Asha answered them too. The emperor said he had a great idea, but the look on his face did not bode well. He said that he was giving her the right to choose her husband as a reward for winning. Asha was shocked and asked him again about what he had just said. She had not come here for some right to choose a spouse. She needed a monetary reward. A servant thrust a list of aristocrats into her hands, and the emperor told her to choose anyone and to look closely at those at the top of the list, since that is where the richest aristocrats were located. Asha opened the list in confusion, and the emperor continued to say that whoever she chose would be obliged to become her husband. Asha tried to appeal to reason, pointing out that everyone would be in a difficult position if she chose someone who did not want to marry her. But the emperor responded to her with something that amazed her, because it turned out that for the refusal of the aristocrat, his family would transfer compensation to the imperial treasury and to Asha herself. A feeling of disgust came over her, because she realized that in such a vile way the emperor decided not to give her the monetary reward she deserved. Asha understood that no parent would voluntarily give his son in marriage to a woman who looked like a savage. But she heard the emperor, by the will of the monarch, the family would have to pay Pervaz compensation, and this was something that Asha could not refuse, because the people of Pervaz needed money. Gathering her courage, she said that she chose the Duke of Carlisle Haven. The Duke, who had been watching this whole incident in silence, looked at her in surprise. Carlisle Haven. Evaristo was deposed 4 days ago due to an unfortunate incident and was no longer considered a member of the imperial family, but everyone understood that this was a temporary event. Asha followed the emperor's recent words, repeating that the noble at the top of the list was the most influential, and that was why she was choosing the Duke. The Duke remained silent, and the emperor was irritated, because he did not expect Asha to act like this. The crowd whispered that Asha was crazy to lay claim to the former crown prince, who was also known as the Blood Knight, but she was calm. Asha reminded the emperor that if she was refused, the imperial family would have to pay compensation. The crowd began to whisper that if the emperor did this, then Asha would receive the reward she had originally promised. People whispered that the emperor had painted himself into a corner by recommending that Asha look at the aristocrats at the top of the list. The emperor was irritated and at the same time confused, because he really had been trapped by some girl. And the Duke suddenly laughed. He laughed uncontrollably and was greatly amused by what was happening. The emperor shouted that he was giving Asha another chance to reconsider her decision. But Asha was adamant. She said that she only saw the Duke of Carlisle Haven as her husband. When Asha began to say that she was ready to take a monetary reward instead of a husband, Carlisle abruptly interrupted her. Carlisle asked not to make a laughingstock of the emperor and said that the emperor's word could not be taken back. The Duke explained that the fact that he was marrying a border lord was ridiculous, but he could not allow his father's promise to be regarded as a joke. Asha was stunned. She didn't expect him to do this. She thought the imperial family would simply agree to give her money. They looked at each other in silence for a couple of seconds. Carlisle broke the silence by saying that he accepted Asha's offer. Asha didn't know how to react, because this didn't fit in with what she had planned at all. She didn't understand why he did this. Asha panicked, because she only needed money, not a husband. Carlisle chuckled. Looking at her, he asked her, as his wife, to take care of him in the future. And this finally knocked the ground out from under her feet, because everything was not going according to plan at all. Later, Carlisle drank tea in the palace reception room. Asha went inside as the servants asked her to come to Carlisle. Asha's arrival pulled the Duke out of his thoughts, and he looked at her. Carlisle addressed her as his wife, calling her the brave Margrave Pervaz. After that, he looked at the mug of tea again. From his face, she could only understand that it was completely unclear what this man was thinking and why he had agreed to all this. Asha introduced herself to him formally as Shin Asha Pervaz. She greeted him as the crown prince, and only after what was said did she realize that this was now the wrong address and that she should simply call him Duke Haven, since he had been stripped of his title. Carlisle chuckled. He asked if Asha knew why he was stripped of his title as crown prince. The question confused Asha again. She remembered arriving in the capital with her comrades, sitting by the fountain and discussing the reason why the Duke was stripped of his title. Asha was not interested in discussing other people's lives, but she had a newspaper in her hands. It was precisely in it that it was said that the crown prince was stripped of his title for his dishonest act. He desired his father's concubine. Carlisle snapped Asha out of her thoughts by telling her that whether she knew it or not, she would have to accept it now. Asha was silent and just looked at him, because earlier she could not even imagine that the man from the newspaper article would become her husband. Carlisle asked how long she planned to just stare at him in silence. He assumed that since this was happening, his appearance must have impressed Asha very much. This brought her out of her thoughts, and Asha explained that it wasn't about looks, and she was simply jealous of his physique. This already puzzled Carlisle. He believed that he had a very attractive appearance, and it was strange if it did not interest Asha. Asha calmly explained to him the pros and cons of such a body type. Carlisle was still confused, but he began to follow her train of thought and clarified that when she said cons, she meant the battlefield. Asha nodded, saying that she would like to have such a physique, but it was impossible because she was a woman. Carlisle was puzzled by her words, finding the whole conversation extremely non-trivial. But he decided not to devote much time to this. Exhaling and letting go of these thoughts, he suggested moving on to the terms of the deal. Asha asked him again in surprise. Calling it a deal was unexpected for her. Carlyle haughtily remarked that he had not accepted her proposal out of great love. Asha thought that this was indeed the case, and that he probably had a hidden purpose. She asked what it was. Carlyle began to explain that during his overthrow, his father had set him a condition. The condition was that if Carlyle repented of his arrogance by serving the Empire for 3 years, his title of Crown Prince would be restored. Carlyle revealed his cards, which is why he wanted to help Pervaz, who was exhausted by the war. Asha began to understand the course of his thoughts and asked about the 3-year period and what would happen after that. Carlyle looked into his cup and said that after that time, they would be getting a divorce. Asha was glad to hear this, because she didn't need a husband in the first place. Carlyle made it clear that as part of their deal, Asha was not to expect him to treat her as his wife for the next 3 years. He said that if she accepted these conditions, he would not spare gold for Pervaz and would help her in any way he could. Pervaz needed money, so it all sounded good, but there was something in this deal that Asha couldn't afford. She asked the Duke what he intended to do in her lands, and said that she could not give her consent if it would harm Pervaz. Carlyle asked if she was really ready to refuse and die of starvation along with the villagers. But without waiting for Asha's answer, he immediately said that it was not in his interest to harm Pervaz. Asha agreed, because there was sense in his words. It really wasn't in his interests, otherwise he wouldn't get his title back. However, being pragmatic and cautious, Asha asked for a contract to be drawn up. Carlyle asked her again about the contract. He didn't expect her to ask for it. Asha said that since he promised that he would not skimp on help, she wants a contract where this will be clearly recorded, so that the promise will definitely not be broken. Carlyle said he liked that Asha didn't believe in empty promises. He remarked mockingly that they would make a great couple. Asha asked him if he meant a contractual couple, where each would get what they needed and peacefully separate after 3 years. Carlyle chuckled. He said that this was proof that they understood each other perfectly. They drew up a contract. Lionel Bailey, Carlyle's right-hand man, checked the contract and noted with interest that it was very detailed. Carlyle said that Asha was smart and would not take losses, which is why she approached the contract issue in such detail. Lionel exhaled and asked if it was true that Carlyle was marrying this savage. He complained that Carlyle had such a choice of much more worthy candidates, but the Duke himself said that it was for 3 years and gave him a unique opportunity. Lionel looked at him blankly and asked what possibility he was talking about. Carlyle said this was his chance to get rid of the scum who dared to covet his place. It brought back old memories of being sent to the battlefield at the age of 15. This happened because after the death of his mother, his stepmother wanted him dead. But Carlyle fought hard and survived. Nobody knew exactly how. Perhaps it was God's will. After his numerous victories, bards sang songs about him, now calling him the god of war. In the capital, everyone greeted him with victory. Only the stepmother was not delighted with this news, because she hoped that he would not return alive to the capital. She tried to think of something else to eliminate Carlyle and make Matthias, her son, the crown prince. It was she who persuaded Vivian Lowry, the emperor's concubine, to frame Carlyle by having Carlyle come to her in the night, thinking that someone else would be there. The emperor summoned him to his presence after Vivian's false complaints, which she had made up on the orders of the empress. Carlyle tried to convey to him the idea that they were trying to set him up, but the emperor was angry and would not listen to anything. He believed that Carlyle's arrogance had gone beyond the pale, since he dared to encroach on his woman. The emperor shouted that he was stripping him of his title of crown prince. Carlyle returned from his old memories to the present, telling Lionel that with this strategy, the empress apparently wanted to get rid of 2 things that irritated her at once. Lionel only noted with a sigh that she had succeeded, and, although temporarily, Matthias would now be treated as the crown prince, while Carlyle himself no longer had a title. Carlyle said that in 3 years the empress would clearly try to prevent the restoration of his title, but he confidently declared that the throne was his and he would kill all who encroached on it. Carlyle noted that Pervaz would be a great place to build up forces against the empress, and what Asha offered him was like a sign from God. Lionel expressed doubts about whether it was a sign from God to marry someone he didn't even know, but Carlyle said that this was not actually their first meeting. The Duke noted with a smile that they had met before. It was a few days ago. Carlyle remembered being in the capital of the empire then, but not as a representative of the imperial family. Disguised, he walked through the city streets. The cloak hid his face well, and no one guessed that it was Carlyle. He walked and thought about how cleverly the empress had tricked him. Carlyle realized that it had been a mistake to rush into the meeting immediately after receiving the message from the spy, but he thought that if he came, then in the worst case they would try to kill him. He never imagined that everything would end with the loss of his title. However, Carlyle was not going to remain idle. He spread rumors that he was very depressed and locked himself in his chambers, and took advantage of this to leave the palace. While he was thinking about this, the villagers called out to him from behind. Their intentions were not good. Carlyle turned to face them. He saw a knife in the hands of one of the residents. Within a moment, they surrounded him and demanded money. Carlyle thought that as soon as he hid his identity, all sorts of trash would immediately start to surround him, and it irritated him. He was about to deal with them, but a female voice interrupted them all. A female voice said how wrong it was when 3 attacked one. The robbers were unhappy with the appearance of new faces at the scene of their crime. The female voice belonged to Asha, who had come here with her people, and she was determined to make this fight fair. The robbers laughed, realizing that some girl was challenging them. But Asha silently attacked and disarmed the leader of the robbers, all in one blow. The rest of the robbers were shocked that their leader was dealt with so easily. The robbers became scared. They didn't expect this, and now they didn't know what to do. Carlyle simply watched her and concluded that she was an experienced warrior. The robber who was most afraid hid behind his comrade and sent him to deal with Asha. Ashi's comrade-in-arms, Decker, grabbed him by the collar. He said that it was wrong to send others into battle and that one should fight oneself. Decker asked Asha about the possibility of killing this man. Asha replied that perhaps it would be better for them this way, and Carlyle realized that this woman meant business. Looking at these two, Carlyle realized that they were used to shedding blood, and it did not pose any difficulties for them. But they did not kill the robbers, as they did not want to create problems before visiting the palace. The robbers took advantage of the opportunity and escaped. Carlyle thanked his saviors for their help. He said that thanks to them he escaped danger and would like to somehow more substantially thank them for their help. Decker said that in lieu of payment, they would be grateful if he could recommend a decent and cheap inn nearby. They explained that this was more important to them because they had little money and did not want to spend the night on the street with their friends. They clarified that there were only 5 of them and they were not too demanding. Carlyle said he would help them. He asked them to follow him. Lionel pulled him out of his memories again, wondering if Carlyle had been delayed that time precisely because he was with Margrave Pervaz. Carlyle confirmed that this was the case and helped Asha and her friends get themselves ready and enter the palace. Lionel was horrified to realize how skilled a warrior and dangerous a person she was, and that she could harm him, but Carlyle was calm, knowing that Asha could help fight back against the Empress's men. Lionel agreed with this, but he was tormented by some doubts. Carlyle reassured him that she would not betray him as long as Pervaz's fate was at stake, and that she would not fall in love or become a nuisance. He said that he offered her to stay in the mansion with him, but she refused, saying that she would be uncomfortable, and that says a lot about her. Carlyle noted that she was cautious and did not claim a place next to him, and therefore was an ideal match for him. At the same time, in the tower, Asha told her comrades about the contract marriage, and they were surprised. They were worried about Asha, seeing a lot of danger and tricks in this. Asha said that she didn't care. Decker was outraged because it was her life, and she was in danger because it was unknown what to expect now, with connections to members of the imperial family. Asha was determined to help Pervaz at all costs. She believed that despite the risks, this was a good deal. She asked Decker to imagine what life would be like if they were able to restore Pervaz. She described the freedom and landscape that awaited Pervaz and explained that this was why she could not make any other choice. Asha said she was happy to have the opportunity to make such a choice. Her comrades didn't know what to say. They were worried about her, but they understood why she was doing it. Any of them would have done the same. Decker sighed heavily, realizing that he would not be able to convince her otherwise, and only asked when the wedding ceremony would take place. Asha said that the ceremonies were shortened, and after the marriage vows, she could leave for Pervaz straight away. Her comrades doubted that it would go quickly, because this was a wedding of a member of the imperial family, and they usually last for several months. They expressed concern that Pervaz would go hungry the entire time they were there, but Asha said she had good news and shared her memories of what happened. She said that she had already asked the prince when they could return to Pervaz. Carlyle was a little confused by the question. It was the first time he had ever encountered someone wanting to rush through a wedding ceremony. He asked if Asha had a lover since she was in such a hurry to return to Pervaz, but Asha assured him that it was not because of her lover. Asha did this because of Pervaz's people, who are waiting for her and are now starving. Carlyle remained silent. It wasn't often that he met people like Asha. The Duke promised that they would try to finish as soon as possible. He asked Madame Lubar to begin preparing Asha as soon as possible. The old lady smiled. They were ready to start right now. The maids took Asha by the arm, and she did not understand what awaited her. And it would be better if she didn't expect this, because they started washing her. The maids called it cleaning and polishing, but all Asha could think about was that she didn't want to bathe. The maids asked her strange questions during the procedures about her hair. Asha answered honestly, but did not understand what all these questions were about. Then they put a corset on her and were surprised that she didn't wear it, because usually all the girls in the capital wore a corset. They then examined her to see what clothes to wear and noted that she had broad shoulders, which made her feel very awkward. The maids began to argue heatedly about what would suit her, but Asha wanted it all to end as soon as possible. She desperately wanted to return home. And now, finally, these torments ended. In a dress, in a completely unusual form for herself, she walked to the Duke, who was sitting and reading a book. The Duke looked up from his reading when he heard someone else's footsteps. What he saw impressed him. Asha looked completely different. She greeted the Duke wearily, her tone sounding as if she was being beaten by an enemy army. The Duke was surprised by these intonations, and he began to laugh uncontrollably. He said that if anyone saw her now, they would think that she was a soldier of a defeated army. Asha said that this was true, because she was not allowed to carry a weapon. An old lady, Lubar, came up to them. She was worried that it was all too simple for a wedding ceremony, but Asha was stubborn and chose this dress because it seemed comfortable to her. Carlyle reassured her that it was all right because he had prepared something, and the servant immediately brought a small jewelry box. The Duke asked Madame Lubar if what he had in the box would do. Madame Lubar was shocked to recognize the jewelry box as belonging to the Duke's mother, the late Empress. She became nervous and could hardly utter a word. But then Madame Lubar pulled herself together and finally asked if this was the necklace of the late Empress. That was it, and the old lady smiled, saying it was a good choice, perfect for such a simple dress. Asha looked at the necklace and asked if they were rubies, but Carlyle only said that the stones in the necklace were quite obvious. But they were not obvious to Asha. She did not understand jewelry, but she leaned closer to try to understand. Carlyle decided to express himself in a language she understood and said that this necklace was worth 100 war horses. Asha was shocked. She was surprised that some necklace could cost more than 1,000,000 Verona. Carlyle nodded at her guess, because the cost of this necklace was really that high. He opened the box, taking out a necklace. Carlyle placed the necklace around Asha's neck. He asked that this necklace be considered as a deposit that Asha could use in the future. Asha was happy and began to think about what she could buy for the people of Pervaz after selling the necklace. She thought about horses and food. The high priest finished and asked them to exchange rings. The rings looked rich and sparkled pleasantly. Carlyle put the ring on Asha's finger. Carlyle whispered to her that when she sold the ring, she should definitely put it up for auction. It would be more profitable than just selling it to a jeweler. Asha looked at the ring. She remembered the Duke's words and intended to do exactly that in the future because it would help her get more money for Pervaz. Looking at the guests, Carlyle thought that they could not even imagine what this ring really meant to Asha. He thought that his wife had an unusual character and that it was interesting. The high priest pulled him out of his thoughts about this and asked them to sign the certificate. Asha signed. After Carlyle signed, the high priest showed the certificate to the emperor for his seal. Once this was completed, the high priest confirmed the validity of their marriage. He said that no one could deny this union any longer. The high priest said that Asha and Carlyle must keep their vows based on respect and love. Carlyle, looking at the sour faces of the emperor and empress, thought once again that he had accepted Asha's offer very correctly. The high priest asked to seal their oath with a kiss. Asha was not happy about this, but she thought that formalities required it, and she was ready to go through with it. Carlyle, looking at her face, realized that she wanted to end all this as soon as possible and return home. But he didn't want to let her go so easily. He pulled her towards him and kissed. The crowd whispered in shock as they saw the kiss. Carlyle looked slyly at Asha, and he deepened the kiss. Asha didn't like this and bit his tongue, which forced him to break the kiss. She quietly reminded him to remember moderation. Carlyle shrugged and said that without such fun, it would be too boring. The high priest looked at them silently with some disapproval. He said that Saint Lobato was watching over them from above and that they should keep their thoughts pure. Carlyle just chuckled and said that even a saint would understand the passion of the newlyweds. After the ceremony, Asha changed her clothes elsewhere and told Decker that she would have to stay here for a while, but there were supplies that needed to be delivered to Pervaz now, as well as a place to prepare in Pervaz for Carlyle. Asha's people returned to Pervaz first and thought about how to explain Asha's absence to the rest of the residents. With these thoughts, they entered Pervaz. Decker dismounted from his horse. After them, the knights who had been assigned to them by Carlyle entered the city. A resident of Pervaz nervously asked who these knights were and why they were here. Decker hesitated. He himself was not sure that he knew the answer to this question. The knights stopped. Decker tried to explain everything honestly to the residents about Asha's situation, but was condemned for not intervening and not stopping this dubious agreement, because such games could harm her, and the residents were very worried about Asha. Decker tried to explain that this happened because their interests coincided, but the resident was indignant that the warriors promised to return with provisions, but instead, they were going to drag the crown prince. Decker sighed heavily. There was some truth in their words. One of the warriors who arrived with Decker noted that he was also worried about Asha, since they had been attacked several times on the road to Pervaz. The warriors discussed the reason why the Duke had assigned knights to them, and suggested that it was because he did not trust them. But suddenly something flew past Decker. It was something dangerous and sharp. Decker shouted that it was an attack and ordered everyone to grab their weapons. The knights immediately stood up to his defense. Decker and the warriors watched in surprise as the attackers ran away. The warriors realized that the Duke had assigned the knights not out of mistrust, but to protect them. Decker realized that Asha was now stuck between two fires, being a member of the imperial family, for whom threats await at every turn. The warriors became sad when they realized this. They were very worried about Asha, but Decker tried to cheer them up and asked them to hope that everything would end exactly as Asha said. He urged them to work hard, since there was still about a month left before Asha and Carlyle arrived, and their quarters were not yet ready. As the warriors began to disperse, inspired by this, Decker himself began to doubt his own words, worrying that Asha might be in real danger. A few days later, Carlyle visited the Emperor and Empress at the palace. Matthias was also present. They had been talking for some time. Carlyle suddenly asked if Matthias had any questions for him, since he would now be defending the south of the empire himself. Matthias was shocked by what he heard. He had not planned to defend the south of the empire. Carlyle looked at him reproachfully, saying that since he was now the crown prince, he should carry out Carlyle's past duties. He explained that he had previously spent all his time on the battlefield out of duty as the crown prince. Carlyle added that it wouldn't be too difficult. You just need to kill the monsters that appear 2 or 3 times a year and deal with minor conflicts. Matthias was very worried when he heard this, because he had never even properly held a sword in his hand. Carlyle was pleased to see their faces. They were beginning to understand the state of affairs. They themselves would now have to fight, and they could no longer use Carlyle because he was going to Pervaz. The emperor tried to change the subject and began talking about the funds Carlyle had requested. Carlyle asked if the emperor was talking about a dowry and money for the move to Pervaz. The emperor sheepishly confirmed that this was exactly what he was talking about. The emperor said that God was with him about the dowry, but was Carlyle sure that he wanted to give 50 million varans to Pervaz? Matthias supported the emperor, saying that some Pervaz should be grateful for 1 million Verona. Carlyle chuckled, advising Matthias not to say such things in other places. When Matthias asked why, Carlyle replied that it made it too obvious that Matthias had never been to war. Carlyle said that Pervaz's victory over the Lur tribe took 28 years, and Pervaz's territories were greatly devastated during that time. He explained that if Matthias thought that 50 million Verona was too much to repair such damage, then he still had a lot to learn. Matthias swallowed as Carlyle asked the emperor to guide him properly, since he would now have to do all of Carlyle's work. But he was not going to continue the conversation any further, and Carlyle stood up. After wishing everyone good luck, he left. When Carlyle returned to Asha, she was surprised to hear that Matthias did not want to take on military commitments. Carlyle found all this amusing. He began to explain to Asha about the martial law and the duties of the crown prince. He said that these are not only rights, but also responsibilities, and every mistake becomes one for which the crown prince is responsible, and this is very alien to Matthias. Asha clenched her fist in indignation. She realized that they were trying to deprive Carlyle of his status as a member of the imperial family by dragging him into military affairs, because in fact, the emperor himself should have gone to war. Carlyle just smiled and asked if she admired his courage and skills. Asha expressed mild admiration for the fact that he had survived and pulled through, but she expressed it so reservedly and ambiguously that Carlyle did not understand whether it was praise or a curse. However, she said that it was praise. Carlyle thought that if it had been anyone else, he would have thought they were being fawning, but he believed her words. She meant what she said. Knight Rappelt, who was also present, said that the Duke should tell Asha more so that they could have a common goal. Carlyle considered his words, but he changed the subject, asking whether Asha had managed to get to know Rappelt properly, since this was their first meeting. Carlyle introduced Rappelt as his mentor and said he was surprised that he did not object to his marriage to Asha. Rappelt explained his position by saying that he had to change his strategy because Carlyle had fallen for the Empress's bait and had been stripped of his title while Rappelt was away. He turned to Asha and asked how much she knew about His Highness Carlyle. He looked at Asha, waiting for her answer. Asha said that she knew that he was the crown prince from birth and the best knight in the empire. Rappelt nodded and said that Carlyle was born with the blessing of Heiress, the god of war and victory, and showed genius in all forms of martial arts. Asha asked whether this was a real blessing from God. Rappelt confirmed this, saying that the oracle himself had descended into the temple. Rappelt was indignant because it was Carlyle who had ensured peace in the empire, participating in battles for so long, and he did not understand how they dared to deprive him of the status of heir after all this. He did not like the Empress's malicious methods. For him, it was an unthinkable state of affairs. Carlyle asked him to calm down, because they would definitely turn bad luck into good luck. Rappelt agreed with him, but said that they had to try to clear Carlyle of the slander about the concubine, and Asha was surprised to learn that it was a false accusation. When Rappelt said that Asha's role was extremely important, she asked what was required of her. Rappelt explained that the Empress and her son would hinder Carlyle at every step, and that the Margrave must protect him. Asha took this with enthusiasm, believing that she had to protect the Duke both day and night. Carlyle corrected her by saying that he could protect himself, meaning that she should protect him in her role as his wife. Rappelt explained to her that in the imperial family, reputation and duty were valued, which was why no one had objected to her ridiculous request for marriage earlier. Rappelt continued, saying that Pervaz represented an opportunity to build up his strength and stay out of the Empress's sight. He believed that the Empress would try different methods, try to persuade Asha to divorce, or do something more dangerous. Asha thought. The mention of dangerous events spoke volumes. She asked Carlyle if he was planning to start a mutiny while in Pervaz, but he just laughed, saying that he had thought about it, but had no plans to do so. Carlyle explained that he only planned to increase his support, since the Empress had already lost a lot of power. Rappelt specified that they must shape public opinion in such a way that the Emperor would be forced to restore Carlyle's title. Asha nodded. She understood that she needed to take care of herself, not interfere in Carlisle's affairs and be his shield, and then get a divorce when the time came. Carlisle said that was true, but she shouldn't forget that the most important thing she had to do was survive. Asha looked at him in surprise. She didn't expect him to worry about her. Carlisle smiled and explained that this was the only way the future would turn out well for everyone. Asha told him that they had better prepare everything for Carlisle here before leaving for Purvaz, and he joked that she seemed sorry to even give him a simple needle. Asha assured him that it was not a pity, but there was nothing in Purvaz. She explained that if they did manage to find anything, the quality would be much worse. But Carlisle reassured her, saying that he had in fact already written down everything that needed to be taken. He joked that if he later disliked something, he would throw it away, and Asha could take it for herself. It was a joke, but Asha took it seriously and thanked him for it. This was not quite what he expected, but he decided to keep quiet. A few days later, they were ready to leave for Purvaz. Asha was impressed by the amount of stuff they were going to bring with them. Carlisle, standing with her in front of their pile of luggage, asked her if she liked it all. She sincerely admitted that she did not expect such a large amount of luggage, and Carlisle laughed, saying that the Emperor did not expect it either and was in shock. Asha ran her hand over the grains, thinking that even a little bit of this could greatly enrich Purvaz. She smiled, believing that she had made the right choice and now Purvaz could escape poverty. Carlisle called her, saying that it was time for them to go. They got into the carriage. Soon the carriage set off, but soon stopped near one of the settlements. The inhabitants of the settlement joyfully greeted Carlisle, who came out to meet them. He responded to them with reciprocal friendliness and was glad to meet them. He threw a handful of candy to the delight of the children. Asha sat in the carriage and was surprised by the reaction of the residents. She thought that, apparently, he had previously proven himself well as the crown prince. She said that Carlisle seemed to love his subjects. Lionel asked her if she was being sarcastic, and she replied that she was only half said. Lionel calmly explained that, of course, this is also part of the strategy, because in order to regain the title and become emperor in the future, the trust of the people is extremely important. He also said that Asha should get used to accompanying Carline. She thought he was calculating to the core. Carlisle finally said goodbye to the people. He got into the carriage wearily, and Lionel praised him. Carlisle asked Lionel where he should give the show next, and Lionel said Irvindom in 2 days. Catching Asha's gaze, Carlisle asked her what was wrong. Asha said that he and the people who were happy about his visit were so far apart. Carlisle replied that he saw nothing wrong with that, because they were happier the further he went, and that obliged him to become a kind of god. Asha thought that he was staging a play to satisfy the desires of fools. She also thought that although this performance seemed like a deception, it was actually beneficial to both sides. Asha decided that her criticism was not needed here and let everything take its course. It was already getting dark, and they decided it was time to stop and set up camp. The senior knight began giving orders to collect firewood, pitch tents, and post guards. Soon, a servant knocked on the door of Asha and Carlisle's carriage. He happily announced that the camp had been set up and a tent was ready for them. Asha asked him to wait. She had some questions. She didn't expect that there would be only one tent, and the servant didn't understand what was wrong. Asha wanted to say that she was going to live separately, but she looked at Carlisle's suspicious grin and fell silent. Carlisle himself simply took and let the servant go. Asha told him that it seemed that the servant had carried her things to Carlisle as well. The Duke replied that she did not need to repeat it, because he understood perfectly well what the servant had said. Carlisle asked if she really needed a separate tent, and when she said no, he didn't see the problem. The Duke suggested not to complicate things, and for her to sleep in his tent on a woolen blanket, after all, even if only in words, they were spouses. Asha felt a little awkward, especially remembering the rumors, because they said that Carlisle often looked for a partner even on the battlefield. But she decided that if it didn't make him uncomfortable, then everything would be fine, especially since they were a fake husband and wife. But something was bothering her. She suddenly imagined how she changed her clothes and went into the tent, how she brings Carlisle a shirt, and he's standing there in his pants, creating an awkward romantic atmosphere. Asha asks to forgive her, because she is quite clumsy in such things. Carlisle smiles and says that of course he will forgive her. Asha shakes her head, driving away these strange thoughts, and gets out of the carriage, walking away where no one is to think about all this. She doesn't understand why she's even thinking about it, because she's not a shy aristocrat. The beautiful view attracts her attention and brings back memories. She remembered sleeping in her brother's room, but as an adult, she had never shared a room with a man, and it seemed that was what worried her. She looked at the night sky. a thought flashing through her mind about what her family would think if they saw her now. Later, she sat on her knees at a distance and thought that Pervaz had received the money according to the arranged marriage. But it brought many risks and dangers, because now much depended on Carlyle's decisions. Asha prayed for everything to be well with Pervaz. She remembered how her father had shouted to her then that she was now Lord of Pervaz and had to protect him. The memory came over her so suddenly and was so vivid, as if it had happened only yesterday. She chuckled quietly. Asha realized that she should not give in to weakness and ask God for help, because she herself made this deal and is responsible for everything that will happen now. She abruptly plunged her head into the nearby water to cool her thoughts a little. She did so for a brief moment and then immediately rose back up. Asha slapped herself hard across the cheeks and told herself to pull herself together. The blows were very strong, and red marks remained on her cheeks. She became convinced that she would bear responsibility for everything herself. Carlyle had been secretly watching her from afar the entire time. He was shocked when she dipped her head into the water. He thought that this was the first time he saw a girl wash her face like that. He came there when Asha had already left and touched the surface of the water with his palm. He wondered why he was hitting himself so hard on the cheeks, because it wouldn't be long before he was left without teeth. He was even more shocked when he touched the water and realized that it was icy. Carlyle chuckled. After all, Asha was a very interesting girl. Having washed himself, he entered the tent. Asha was already there, and he was surprised by the fact that Asha was actually going to sleep on the ground, and she asked him where, if not here, in response to his remarks. Carlyle laughed that if she didn't care about comfort, then he wouldn't stop her. He walked over to his clothes. The Duke began to unbutton his shirt. When he took it off, Asha saw a very clear torso of a knight and a man who had fought in many battles. Carlyle casually mentioned that the water had become cold, and Asha, looking at his torso, said that with the onset of autumn, it would become completely cold. He looked at Asha and thought that she didn't care at all whether he was dressed or undressed. It seemed funny, and he decided to get her attention by calling her by her title. He sarcastically remarked that as his wife or temporary maid, she would have to help him change his clothes. Asha was surprised. She stood up and apologized for not thinking of it sooner. She took the shirt from his hands, and she asked for forgiveness in advance if her actions were clumsy. Carlyle didn't expect her to agree so easily, but he said it was okay even if she was a little clumsy. She began to help him change his clothes and asked him to put his hand through the sleeve. In a moment he was already dressed. Asha was focused solely on the task. This puzzled Carlyle. He was no longer sure whether the girls were really saying that they admired the type of body he had, or whether it was only men who liked it. Since he had not undressed in front of the girls, he was unsure what kind of reaction to expect from them. Asha pulled him out of his thoughts by saying that she was finished. Asha asked him if he was comfortable. The Duke replied that he was a little uneasy, but everything was fine. Asha was worried after hearing such an answer and asked what was wrong. But Carlyle went to bed and said it didn't matter. Asha was upset. She thought that she had done worse than his servants, and was a little hurt that the Duke showed it so clearly. She lay down on the wool blanket on the floor and thought that, on the whole, maintaining a relationship that didn't go beyond this wouldn't be too difficult for her. Asha thought that since he had dated many people, he would not be interested in her, and now was the time to blow out the candles. Asha blew them out. Carlyle suddenly asked if her back hurt, since the blanket was so thin. Asha said that it was fine for her, because she was used to sleeping on a cloak in the open air, and such a blanket was like luxury to her. Carlyle asked her to tell him about Pervaz. She was surprised and asked what exactly he wanted to know. Carlyle said that it was important for him to know everything, because they would soon get there, for example, how harsh the winters were there. Asha said it was hard to say for sure since she had nothing to compare it to, but the merchant said it was so cold it felt like your pepper was about to shrivel. Carlyle laughed out loud at the comparison. Asha was calm and silent. She thought that, apparently, such loud laughter at the words of the interlocutor was a kind of form of capital etiquette. After Carlyle stopped laughing, he asked if she had cut off the head of the Lure tribe chieftain, and she confirmed it. When Carlyle remarked that he must have had a lot of strength, Asha said that he did, but he was no match for her father. Recalling those events, she sadly said that due to the difference in numbers, her father and brothers died in battle. She said that Rakhmusha, that same leader, spent 28 years in battle, and only the magical power of the Reaper's necklace kept him young. Carlyle listened with interest and asked if this was the same necklace she had presented as a trophy. Asha said that it was so, and that it was a victory for Pervaz, who was supposed to fall, but was saved by her father and brothers. Carlyle said that Amir Pervaz was an outstanding knight. He noted that his father had sent him there to kill him, since it was known that all those who had previously gone to Pervaz had committed suicide without even lasting a year. Asha said that her father knew about the emperor's plans, but he felt that if he was going to die anyway, he should at least try to save Pervaz. Carlyle listened with sadness, as she said that the people of Pervaz had bravely followed him, for Amir had been the first man who had not given up and was preparing to fight the barbarians. Carlyle thought that Amir was a hero who did not run away in a hopeless situation and won the love of ordinary people who needed him so much. Carlyle thought it would be wonderful if Amir Pervaz had not died in this war. He thought that he was a great knight who did not leave the land and spend his whole life in battles. Looking at Asha, he thought that she had grown up the same. He thought that perhaps she had grown up to be even more outstanding than her father had been, since she had even fought the emperor for a reward. Carlyle asked her to tell him about her brothers, how many there were and what they were like. He waited for her answer, but she was silent, and then he saw that Asha was already asleep. He looked again to make sure, and yes, it was amazing, but she really did sleep like a baby. Meanwhile, in the palace, Matthias was very nervous and almost hysterical. He told his mother that he would not go to the battlefield and would not fulfill Carlyle's old duties. The Empress put her hand on his shoulder and tried to calm him down. She calmly said that she had a plan, and everything had been ready for a long time. A few days later, Asha and Carlyle's carriages arrived in Pervaz. Looking out the window, Carlyle noted that things were much worse than he expected. Asha tried to explain about the road, but Carlyle interrupted her, saying that it was not just about the road. He explained that the border of Pervaz had been crossed a long time ago, and there was devastation all around. The fields were abandoned, people were nowhere to be seen, and everything had to be rebuilt anew. He asked how much money Asha was going to get from his father. Asha said that right now they need food and medicine, and that it will take about 500,000 varins to restore Pervaz. Carlyle chuckled at the amount, saying that it would only buy him a couple more sad years and then leave this world. Asha thought sadly that she had voiced a sum greater than the original one. She wondered what she would have heard if it had been the original sum, which, in general, the emperor did not want to give in any case. Carlyle said that in any case, she now received the best reward, and Asha agreed with him, but it was sarcasm. Carlyle noted her sarcasm, but the girl herself only sighed. They reached the castle, and overall, Asha thought that Carlyle was right. 500,000 Verona was nothing, and when they ran out, if nothing changed, many people would die again. Already in the castle, Asha warned the Duke that although they had put things in order here, the condition of the castle left much to be desired, and the Duke might be uncomfortable here. Carlyle quietly noted that it seemed like he had heard this for the 100th time. Asha thought that it really wasn't worth talking about it so many times, because he had been wandering around the battlefield since childhood and hadn't complained even when they were coming here. Decker came out to greet them. Asha was glad to see him and placed her hand on his shoulder as a greeting. The servants lined up in 2 rows and also greeted them. As she passed them, Asha thought it was enough of a welcome that no one would think she was being disrespectful, though part of her wondered if it was enough. The residents whispered that it was wrong for the prince to remain here. Asha heard them say that it would be better for him to find a better place. Asha looked at Carlyle, wondering if he was starting to feel like he had come here for nothing. But Carlyle only asked where his quarters were. Asha said hesitantly that the entire 2nd floor was at his disposal, and that he and his retinue could stay there. Carlyle noted that the 2nd floor was usually where the lord's family lived, but Asha said that she would be staying on the 1st floor. Carlyle smiled and thanked her. Asha just nodded silently. Carlyle shouted to Lionel to move all the things to the 2nd floor. Asha watched as Lionel and the other servants carried out this task. Decker came up and hugged Asha. He said that the head maid had worked hard to prepare the room on the 1st floor, and it was ready for occupancy. Asha smiled and asked if her room really needed any changes, but Decker said that since the war was over, she should enjoy the privileges of a lord. The other warriors greeted Asha from afar and went on about their business. Carlyle noticed how happily Asha was interacting with Decker. He thought that he had never seen her so happy. Asha laughed out loud and went to look at her room with Decker and the guys. Here in her room, with Decker and the others, she couldn't believe what they had prepared for her. Basti was worried that she didn't like it. Asha asked him what kind of bed it was, the decorations and everything, but he tried to explain that this was how the capital's aristocracy slept. She touched the wooden part of the bed and praised him for the work he had done, as he had been able to reproduce very accurately what he had only seen once. Asha thought they were weirdos for doing all this, but she was very grateful to them. She thanked Basti separately, saying that it was the first time she would sleep on such a luxurious bed. Asha confirmed that she liked it and that she felt a little awkward. Then she saw the flowers. Asha was very happy. She thought that the head servant had put them here because in Purvaz flowers meant the end of the war. She thanked the head maid Della for her work, and she said that there were a couple of shortcomings left, but she was glad that Asha liked everything. Decker also praised the head maid and noted that she took on all the duties in the absence of a butler. Asha said that she would try to find someone to help as soon as possible, and since rumors of Carlair's arrival had already spread, it shouldn't be too difficult. Della noted that since Asha was now a lord, it would be better if the servants did this. Asha asked if she had anyone in mind. Della confirmed that she had already chosen someone. She called Nina. A nice girl with red eyes and dark blonde hair came in to see them and greeted everyone in a friendly manner. Della explained that she would help Asha with everything. Asha thanked Nina and said that she expected a good job, and Nina bowed with a smile. Asha smiled and thanked everyone for their good work, recommending that they go and rest, and asked only Decker and Della to stay so that she could talk to them separately. When everyone else had left, Asha said that materials would start arriving in Purvaz tomorrow, and there would be a lot of work ahead. She clenched her fists, feeling the tension, and said that there might be disagreements between them and Carlisle's subordinates. But Asha explained that she would not force the people of Purvaz to endure this, because this was a profitable deal, not a slave contract. Asha said that she would take care of everything and asked them to gather forces to restore Purvaz. The next day, Carlisle began to attend to Purvaz's affairs and communicated with Lionel. He was a little surprised that none of those who returned with the money to Purvaz before Asha had hidden it, but Lionel said that this was quite expected for people who had been through a lot of hardships together. Carlisle thought that what made him think that was their appearance. They looked like bandits. Carlisle said that although they had shaken hands with Margrave Purvaz, it was no guarantee of loyalty, and a thorough investigation must be conducted among Purvaz's people. He asked for a particularly thorough investigation into Asha's assistant, and Lionel immediately identified him, saying that it was Decker Donovan and that he had something about him. Lionel said that he is the eldest son of the Donovan family, who are vassals of Amir Purvaz, and he was previously mentioned as a potential marriage candidate for Asha. Carlisle thought that she and this ignorant big guy were two peas in a pod. At the same time, in the capital, the high priest Gabriel was praying. His prayer was interrupted by the arrival of the Empress. He was waiting for her and greeted her with a smile when he noticed her, expressing the hope that she was doing well. She noted that thanks to the high priest, her life was going better than usual. She sat down next to him and asked if she could steal a few minutes of his time to discuss the future of the state. The high priest said that it would be an honor for him to listen to her. Supplies from the capital arrived in Purvaz within a week, and life instantly became better. The people of Purvaz joyfully greeted Asha when they met her. The people in the infirmary tried to do the same. Asha kindly asked the sick and wounded not to get up just to greet her. She didn't want them to feel uncomfortable. They looked at her with adoration and reported that there were no problems foreseen in the infirmary for the time being. She saw Decker and came over to ask if everything was okay with the food distribution. Decker greeted her with a smile and said that everything was fine. Everyone was getting their share, and all the residents were happy. Asha praised him, saying that much of this was due to him as the organizer. Decker said it was a shared effort, as Asha had worked with him all night to distribute everything and set rations so that there was enough food for every resident. Asha asked if there was flour on the distribution, and Decker replied that there was not only flour, but also salt and yeast, and people could now afford to eat bread. Asha smiled and suggested that the smell of freshly baked goods would fill the area. Decker said that was exactly what would happen, since they had fixed the community oven and people would definitely use it. Asha asked if there was a shortage of any items, but he replied that they now had an excess of all items and that tomorrow he would receive applications for seed distribution. Decker was glad, because it had been so long since the last time people planted anything. Asha was immensely happy that she would see the harvest again, and this event would happen long before her death. She clenched her fists. She was determined to make every effort and do everything in her power to restore Purvaz. One of the residents called out to her. He said that wood had been brought to the workshop, and it was worth taking a look. Asha said that she was leaving everything to Decker here and went to the workshop. The resident happily showed her the way. As they approached, Asha froze at what she saw. She couldn't believe her eyes. There was so much wood. The resident explained that rumors say Carlyle purchased surplus timber from northern properties and even treated it to prevent fire. Asha was amazed. She didn't understand when Carlyle managed to do this, because he had so little time. Asha thought that she couldn't pay Carlyle back even with her life, because he had made all her wishes come true. Another servant called her. Asha turned around and found Carlyle looking for her. Asha came to Carlyle and asked how she could help. Carlyle asked how things were going in Pervaz. Asha thanked him, saying that everything was much better than she expected. Carlyle said he spent a lot of money and resources, but he doesn't know where or how it's being used, and that's where he needs help from Asha. Asha was embarrassed and asked for forgiveness. She didn't think that he would be interested in the process of Pervaz's restoration. He looked at her with interest. She thought that she was wrong, and if he was not interested in this, then he simply would not have provided so many resources. Asha said she would immediately provide plans for the reconstruction and budget allocation. She asked to wait a minute to do it. Carlyle wanted to stop her, saying that it was not so urgent, but she had already left. Carlyle was a little shocked by her speed. Lionel just sighed. He had said before that Margrave Pervaz was not the kind of person who would take credit for something. Carlyle found it hard to believe, since most people would have taken whatever they wanted. Carlyle judged this way because he was used to the fact that embezzlement of public funds was common. People kept double-entry bookkeeping or something like that. Carlyle said with certainty that even here, behind their careful preparation, there were sure to be inaccuracies and deceptions. Asha, a little out of breath, happily announced that she was back. She brought plans for the use of natural resources, provisions, grain, consumables for the infirmary, and much more. Carlyle studied all this and realized that there was no deception here. He saw that she had thought out the plan perfectly and had taken absolutely nothing for herself. He admitted that the plan was flawless, and Asha thanked him for his words. She was very pleased to hear them, and it even embarrassed her a little. He asked if she kept anything for herself, and Asha didn't quite understand his words. Here, Carlyle was a little embarrassed, but still asked if she had kept the money he had given to the treasury for herself. Asha didn't understand how this related to the restoration of Pervaz. He changed the subject and asked if she had decided what she would exchange for the necklace and engagement ring he had given her. Asha said that once they divorced, she would exchange them at auction, and with the proceeds she would train the cavalry. Since Carlyle had many riders, Asha wanted to ask for advice on this matter, but Carlyle said that it was too early for them to talk about it. Carlyle said that he had checked everything he wanted and had no more questions. Then Asha took her leave. Having taken all the documents, she left. Carlyle couldn't believe it, but Asha was distributing everything to the business and not taking anything for herself. She had even already thought about what she would do with the wedding gifts. Lionel asked if Carlyle was upset by this fact. Carlyle said that this was absurd, since his mother's much-coveted necklace seemed like a useless trinket in these circles. Carlyle thought that perhaps the necklace had a curse on it that meant it couldn't stay with one owner for long and would be better off being sold. Carlyle remembered that whenever the necklace was mentioned, people looked at him with pity, and it irritated him. Carlyle decided to change the subject and asked Lionel how things were going in the imperial family now. Meanwhile, in the gallery of the temple, the Empress spoke with the high priest Gabriel, and he assured her that only the gods could hear their conversation. The Empress took a breath and said that it was the high priest's words that if Carlyle became emperor, the country would face a dark future, since he had killed countless times. She was anxious and spoke of the horrors of what would happen if such a child came to power. The high priest noticed that even without this, people were departing from the word of God, and Carlyle, being blessed by God, was the first to do this. The Empress exclaimed emotionally that this is exactly what she was talking about. She asked the Reverend to support her and Matthias. He didn't answer her, sadly lowering his gaze to the floor. Then he said that he was ready to help her, but then she would have to do something. The Empress was ready for anything and asked what exactly was required of her. The high priest said that if he helped Matthias become emperor, the Empress would have to make Chad a holy empire. The Empress hesitated, asking what exactly he meant by sacred empire. He explained that this meant that the Chad Empire would be governed by the laws of Alehe, and this would distinguish it from the barbarian countries. The Empress hesitated. She understood the problematic nature of such a change. She tried to soften the edges by saying that she too believed in following God's will, but she had yet to think about the sacred empire. She said goodbye to him, saying that they would see each other next time. He watched her leave in silence. He was tormented by various thoughts, and he did not like the fact that the Empress did not immediately give her consent to the sacred empire. Summer has arrived in Pervaz. Carlyle trained his sword skills by fencing with Lionel. Carlyle knocked the sword out of his hands, which upset Lionel, but Carlyle supported him, saying that his skills were getting noticeably better. Lionel replied that he didn't think he would win, and Carlyle noted that that was exactly why he lost. Carlyle said that although this was the northernmost part of the empire, summer was summer, and the heat here was terrible. Carlyle took off his shirt. He scooped up some water from the barrel and poured it over himself to freshen up a little. Lionel noted that Margrave Pervaz was busy reviving agriculture in the feudal territory, and with her zeal, the field could be plowed twice. As Carlyle put his shirt back on, he commented that she had been full of excitement when she first dropped the seeds into the earth, to which Lionel was surprised that the Duke was able to discern emotion on her rather indifferent face. Carlyle remembered what Asha looked like at that moment. He smiled at the memory. Carlyle said he could actually do that if he looked at her carefully. Lionel was surprised by these words. Carlyle changed the subject and asked if they had managed to unpack all the things from the capital, and Lionel replied that almost all the things had been unpacked. However, he said that there was a matter that was bothering him. He spoke about the servants' attitude towards Pervaz's people and was worried that this would upset Asha. Carlyle noted that he had told the servants to only go to their area, so he didn't understand what might happen. He told Lionel that it would be better to take care of the aristocrats who remained in Pervaz, because they could cause much more trouble. Although Lionel accepted the order, he felt that he should also keep an eye on the servants later, so that they did not cause trouble for anyone. Nina walked past the imperial servant in a hurry.